Okay, I'll go ahead and call this meeting of the Madison Local Board of Education to order, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call.
Mrs. Melissa Walker.
Here.
Mrs. Cotterman.
Here.
Mr. Mosier.
Here.
Miss Amy Walker.
Here.
Mr. Wigton. Absent.
Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
I second.
I know, but is there just no? Okay, just roll call, no discussion on it. Okay. Mrs. Melissa Walker.
4.
Mr. Mosier.
4.
Mrs. Cotterman.
4.
Miss Amy Walker.
4. And next up, approval of previous board meeting minutes.
So moved.
I'll second.
Mrs. Melissa Walker.
4.
Mrs. Cotterman.
4.
Mr. Mosier.
4.
Miss Amy Walker.
4. And presentation of certificates. Do we have anything?
None.
Recognition of visitors.
So I'd like to introduce some folks from the county and the Richland County Sheriff's Office, and then one of them or a couple of them will come forward and share with you the Sheriff's Office request to access our district camera system in emergency situations. So we have with us tonight County Commissioner Tony Vero, Major Joe Massey of the Sheriff's Office, and Captain Jim Sweat of the Sheriff's Office. So if one of you would come forward and just share with the board the reason for the request, and they may have some questions.
Good evening. Thanks for inviting us. The reason we wanted to come here tonight, we've had some prior discussions with the superintendent, and what we want to try to do is have access to your cameras for emergency purposes. We think that's very important. If there is a high-risk incident that's going on inside the school, it gives our dispatchers access in order to deploy units. We would be able to, as command staff from the Sheriff's Office, while we have units en route, we'd be able to coordinate where those units should go along with dispatch and have a quicker response to where the threat is. And as you know, several years I came before the board and talked about the SRO, which has been a great addition, I think, to Madison schools. I wish at some point we could add more. That's kind of like more on our end, manpower-wise, and getting people to take that position because it's a very dedicated position. But for the purposes of tonight, we can get into the technical part and with Captain Sweat, how that would actually work, and then Commissioner Vero, who would help us fund that project up from our end, and then we'd have to coordinate it with your IT department as well. But our goal is just to make the students, teachers, and the community more safe, and we're all on board with that. Ontario does a similar thing. We have access to their cameras already. In case they have an emergency, we can respond, and hopefully we can get the other schools on board as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess my purpose here is to answer any questions you folks may have about the process or how it would work for us at the Sheriff's Office or anything that would be needed on your end to make that happen. If anyone has any questions.
Define emergency or high risk.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just that, emergency or high risk. So anytime that we need to be coming here, lights and sirens like an active shooter, an active assailant within your facility. It could be after hours for a break-in or a burglary or anything to that, like in those type of natures. A large-scale incident, a large fight that might break out within your facility or anything like that is where we would be intention. Everyday disorderly student, that we don't have any intention or time to be looking at the cameras in situations like that. We wouldn't even want to for that purpose.
What was the reason this became, or how it became about?
Yeah, so I guess a little bit of history there. Commissioner Vero and the county school board had met, including the superintendents from all of the county schools, and out of that meeting came, how can we help each other to be safer in situations? The county was looking to find ways to fund some of the school programs and whatnot, and this is one of those things that came out of that meeting, that making sure that we had the ability to interact with the schools and the cameras and whatnot. I can tell you Lucas is on board already, Crestview has already been on board, their school boards have already approved this. As the major stated earlier, we're on board with Ontario schools, and eventually the plan would be all law enforcement would have the ability to see all schools within the county. Again, if something happens at your school, and it's that large of an incident or that high of a priority of an incident, we don't expect that we should have to ask Mansfield, the State Highway Patrol, Lexington. We expect they're all coming here to help us, as we will be going to them. God forbid we had one of those situations at one of their facilities.
Would it be used for, like an exterior camera be used for something that wasn't on school property, but you could see it with our camera?
I think that could be a possibility, but in those type of situations, we wouldn't go get that information ourselves. We would contact your IT department and have them pull that for us. We don't want to go back and look for anything that we don't have to look. Now, obviously, if, again, God forbid, if we had an active shooter here and they fled the facility, then yes, maybe we would go in there at that point and try to find a vehicle, direction of travel, those type of incidents information so we could pass along to the other responders. But for lower level things such as that, no, we have no intention of doing that. We would follow a normal chain and contact your IT department, ask if they could pull the video for us.
Any other questions?
Yep, cost. What's additional cost, or is there any cost to the board, or how's that work?
As I understand it, there is no additional cost because your system will be a web-based system, and so basically at that point, cloud-based, we would just get a username and sign in. That would be the extent. Right, correct? I'm not misspeaking there.
Yeah, before we agreed to consider this and bring it before the board, we wanted to make sure there would not be a cost to the district. Yes.
All right.
I'm good.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, administrative committee reports, and legislative, there is none. Athletic Board of Control.
Have not met.
And student representative comments, not here. Facilities.
Mr. Christ emailed all of you. He was not able to be here tonight, so you have an email.
And board policy, we have no report for that. Student achievement.
Not a whole lot to report since school let out. For the middle school, there was an 8th grade student, Gavin Baker, who took first place in the 110-meter hurdles at the middle school state track meet. Additionally, he also took second place in the state in the 200-meter hurdles. Going into the state track meet, Gavin had only lost in the 110-meter hurdles once this season. His accomplishments were also highlighted this month in an article published in the Mansfield News Journal. And then at Eastview, we are proud of the hard work and effort that was put into the state testing in the spring. We are exceptionally proud of the 5 students who received perfect test scores. 1 third grader received a perfect score in ELA, and 4 fourth graders received a perfect score in math. Our end of the year iReady scores showed that our building averaged over a year's worth of growth in both ELA and math. In ELA, our building average was 141%, and in math, 115%. That's it.
And then we have superintendent's update.
Just a very brief report. It's been a a very busy month. I was kind of surprised when I looked down at my calendar this week and realized we've been out of school for a month already. The summer is flying by. We've had a lot of hiring going on, which you can see from the agenda, and staffing our buildings. There's a lot of work going on in the buildings, getting them cleaned, getting them ready for the next school year. Our tech department has been busy and getting things hooked back up and ready. That is really one of our important goals, is to have everything ready to go for the teachers when they come back in August. Looking forward to a great school year. Going back to the hiring, I am well into hiring. As you all know, Natasha Repp, our director of the Early Childhood Learning Center, has resigned. She's going into private business in that field, and working on, we've done some interviewing, offered the job to a candidate, and still waiting to hear back probably tomorrow morning from that candidate. So hopefully we'll have that position hired. The other thing that we are anxiously awaiting is the budget bill down in Columbus. They are supposed to have had that on the governor's desk and ready to be signed by the end of the week, although I think there's a little bit of difficulty down there between the Senate and the House coming to agreement on that. But most of all, we're waiting to see what the state funding will be and how that might impact our plan for putting a levy on the ballot in November. As I have shared with you, we've already made or will be making throughout the 23-24 school year approximately $700,000 in budget cuts going into the year, and very hopeful that we can get a levy passed and get our revenue up to where it needs to be so that we can operate the schools at a level that they should be operated at. So anxiously awaiting to hear what Columbus is going to do, and getting ready for the fall and what we need to do financially. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have 8 presentations. First up, Mr. McVicker with technology.
Well, good evening. Thank you very much for having me. Obviously, I want to follow up a little bit with what they were talking about with the security cameras. Exterior of the building, the focus of those cameras are really on the parking lots and sidewalks coming into the building. Much beyond school property, we're not going to be able to see. So I think that was a question that you asked. So hopefully that helps to clarify it a little bit. You'll see in front of you some of the things that we've had with the technology program for this year. I'm going to focus on what we did in the spring and how we're getting ready for the fall. Mr. Peterson mentioned some of the things that we wanted to do was to get the technology department involved in the disconnecting and also the turn-in of Chromebooks. In the past, my understanding is that the students turned those in. Over the summer, the tech department had a chance to get their hands on them. Sometimes those were turned or given out in the fall, may not have been completely functioning, or they may have been missing pieces or parts, and there were a lot of complaints. So we took it upon ourselves this year, as the students were turning those in at the end of the year, we wanted to get our hands on them. We wanted to check and make sure all the keys were there, that it turned on, that the chargers were present, that the cases were there. And if they weren't, we charged accordingly. In the high school, we repeated. In the middle school, we did the same thing. We got our hands on them for the most part, but unfortunately, because of the way we scheduled, we had our time was committed to the high school, even though they were turning them in at the middle school. Once we got to the middle school, it was after school was out, so that process was a little bit later. But we were able to touch over 1,600 Chromebooks between the middle school and high school prior to June 1st, which I think for our department was a big accomplishment. It's basically 3 or 4 people that were working on those. So we were able to do that. Any of those that we found that needed to be repaired, we set them to the side, and they've been since repaired. So we are ready for the start of the school year as far as the student Chromebooks are concerned. Teachers, the workstations and devices within the classrooms, again, when we started and taking a look at it, one of the frustrations was that the custodians were involved in pulling those out, moving them so that the rooms could be cleaned. Sometimes they didn't get back in connected properly. Teachers would come in the first part of August, and there was the frustration. Of course, they go to the principals, frustrated, came to the tech department. So as a tech department, we decided, why aren't we involved? So we got involved. Met with the custodians through the year and scheduled a time that we could get in. As soon as school was out, the day following, we started to go into classrooms pulling the devices. Pulled them, put them out of the way on shelves, counters, whatever, so the custodians can focus on cleaning. Our goal then is to have all that reconnected by August 1st. So that's what I explained in one of the slides. Obviously, we'll reverse that order since we disconnected everything. We're going to reconnect. Again, the goal of having those in place by August 1st. Mr. Peterson asked me today how the process was going. At this point, I figure district-wide we have about 40% of the classrooms reconnected. We had set aside the month of July to actually do that, so we're a little bit ahead of the game. But we've coordinated with the custodians as they finish a wing or a hallway. They make us aware that you can go in and do your work. We're following in right in behind them. And again, the goal there is that once the teachers come back in, for the majority of the classrooms, they just plug their laptops in, their devices in, and they should be ready to go. It also is giving us an opportunity in the elementaries, especially to clean all the Chromebooks that are in the carts. Teachers had asked during the year, they get dirty, they need to be sanitized. You can only imagine what the little guys do with those screens. So we've cleaned them all off, and that's the goal. Same thing with the interactive flat panels. They're in the classrooms. We're wiping those, cleaning those, and sanitizing them with the goal that once school starts, everything should be back up and running. Or if there are areas of concern, we've already seen them, we know them, we can address them pretty quickly. So that's what we talk about with reconnecting. Distribution, when the students start to come back in, we want to reverse the process. We were involved with collecting them in the middle school and high school. We're on the calendar now to distribute those. Tech department, we want to be involved. So when we hand the device to a student, we're going to ask them, you have a case, you have a charger, open up the Chromebook and please turn it on. Then they cannot come back to us, should not be able to come back and say, I didn't get a charger. My Chromebook didn't work, it's never worked. So we're going to try to avoid those things. And again, having our hands on them in the summer, we've already found where the damage is. We've already corrected those mistakes. So that's what we talk about on the second slide that I have up there. Some things to note about this, as I mentioned, this is the first time that we've been involved as a tech department with the turn-in, the distribution, the disconnect and reconnect process. After each of those have taken place, we've sat down as a department. We've spoken to the administration to see what we need to change, what we need to do differently, because we want to continue this process as we move forward. Again, 1,600 devices we need to get our hands on and make sure that they're ready to go. We'll do the same thing in the fall once the distribution takes place, and also when the reconnect takes place. We'll sit down as a staff and take a look and see, is this the most efficient way to do it? What do we need to do differently? What do we need to change? Custodians are no longer involved in the disconnecting and reconnecting of those devices. I don't know, I guess in my mind, it should have been the tech department from the beginning. It is now, and it will be. One thing that I will point out here, as I mentioned with devices and fixing them, We are studying, we're looking at hiring, looking into a third party to do those Chromebook repairs. This year, the amount of time that it's taken to do the fixes for our tech department, when you consider the secretarial staff that's involved, administrative staff that is involved with determining what, why, and how they were broken or damaged, the amount of time the tech department is putting in to fix those pieces and parts for them, we figure we're about 8 or 9 solid weeks of our time to make those kind of repairs. Again, 1,600 middle school, high school, you've got a lot of students, a lot of activity with those. So we're considering a third-party vendor to provide those services for this. And the way that it worked, there would be a charge that would be a parent responsibility. And once that amount is paid, then those Chromebooks, if there is damage, we would have notification to the parent, say, your son, your daughter, turned in a damaged Chromebook. This is what we see as the damage. We'll box it up and ship it to that third-party vendor for the repairs. Shipping cost is theirs, it's not ours. We would cover everything, that process would cover everything other than intentional abuse, intentional breaks, lost, stolen, and it will not cover the chargers. But otherwise, any damage to the Chromebook would be covered through that process. This would be the first time that we've done something like this. We're doing the research on it. We're talking to other schools to see what their experience has been. Right now, we feel that it probably is a very good way for us to handle the damage, considering that the tech department, as you'll find out a little bit, will be down one person for the upcoming year. I'm really hoping that the tech department can do more with the time and more support to the staff than dealing with having to fix Chromebooks. We need to shift from the break-fix attitude and more to the support of the teachers and the curriculum. So I wanted to mention, I didn't have that in the slides, but I did want to mention that's one of the processes we're taking a look at. Maybe? Long term, I'll go back. Challenges for the 23-24 school year. We are working to maintain over 6,000 student and staff devices. That includes printers, interactive flat panels, projectors, other devices that would be within the classroom, and we have some 3D printers in the district. We're also working to develop processes for evaluating instructional materials and equipment. We found this year, as we looked at the board policies, I felt that they were a little lax in some areas, that we were having some people making purchases because they felt that was the best thing for the classroom. However, we were finding as a tech department, either it didn't incorporate it into what our network system is, or it didn't meet some of the laws with SEPA and COPA compliance for child protection. And it's one of the efforts that we had as a tech department to really challenge the staff and to make sure what they were bringing to us is appropriate. And it's the best thing for the district. So that's one of our goals this year, is to tighten that up and put processes in place. I've also asked our tech department to take a look at policies and the procedures that they have with completing the how do I do these type of things. And this is really more for the staff. We get a lot of things that say, this doesn't work, or my screens aren't working. We find out it's something that's fairly simple to resolve, yet some people aren't comfortable with trying to work on those. So we want to make sure that we update some of those pages that we have, and we can refer them to those, and then they can make those changes on their own. We can support that, but it allows us to do some other things. Continuing to move forward with the upgraded security system is another priority for this coming school year. As you already know, we're looking to allow access for the Richland County Sheriff's Department. I was a part of the Ontario process when it happened out there, and honestly, it was a fantastic move for our community. So when we talked about it here, Mr. Peterson approached me about it. I said, yeah, I'm on board. However we can make it work, let's try to do it. The biggest thing that, as I mentioned with the tech department, I want to see us move away from being the break-fix people and more of how we support the teachers in the classroom. With what's happening with some of the professional development, I felt it's an area that we can step in and do some things. We can provide those opportunities for teachers if they have questions about some of the technology. We shouldn't simply go in there the first week of school and show them. We need to go back over and over. Ask them if this is how they want to use it. Are the flat panels being used to the best of their capabilities? So we need to support the staff, and that's the direction I feel that we need to go. Finally, to talk about some of the long-term vision that I think we need to do as a tech department. Infrastructure upgrades, which includes networking, storage, and communications. We need to take a look at that. We need to take a look at putting a plan together to facilitate that kind of growth. Cybersecurity and data recovery processes are going to be very important. We're hearing more and more about it. I know Mr. Stevens is one of the things with the insurance is that they talk quite a bit about cybersecurity and data recovery. We need to put a plan in place so we're able to handle that, at least how we will handle it internally. Mentioned the technology focus on professional development for the teaching staff. I think it is very important how we integrate curriculum and technology. I think it's an area we can definitely improve on, and it's one of the goals. And also district-wide purchase and replacement plans for student and classroom devices. COVID brought a lot of money into the district, allowed us to do a lot of things. It happened one time. Now we have to sustain it. So we've talked about some of those procedures of how we sustain those, how we take a look at the budget, put it into some kind of rotation so we can flatline what the costs are, but be able to provide new devices for students over a period of time. Could be a 4, could be a 5-year cycle, but we need to get in that. As soon as the levy passes, we'll start implementing that. That's the goal. So appreciate the time. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Okay. Any questions? No, thank you. We have Mrs. Feider from Food Services.
Okay. Well, hopefully you can hear me because, I'm not that tall.
You can pull that down.
I think I can holler enough. I want to talk to you about food service. Kind of going to go over a little bit of what we did last year and a little bit the year before because I wasn't able to talk to you in August. So I'm going to kind of hit on that. The total breakfast, the district-wide that we served was 78,187. That was 23% lower than the previous year. The total lunch for the district that we served was 280 meals and 280,663 meals, which was 8% lower than last year. The difference was because USDA and the state, they stopped offering the free meals at the very beginning of the school year. So that kind of hit us and everything, and I wasn't happy about that, and I know that they are checking into that, but I'll hit on that later on. I'll explain that. The meals we served by building, at the high school we served over 86,000 meals, but we brought back also a la carte. Some of the a la carte items that we brought back for the kids was personal pizzas. We did fruit parfaits, baked pretzels and cheese dip, chicken and turkey wraps, chicken salad croissants. We did sugar-free drinks, whole grain chips, and whole grain cookies. And these were all what we were allowed to with state regulations. So that was a great thing. That was a big success. The middle school, they served over 116,000 meals. South served 85,000 meals, as well as Eastview served 33,000 meals over, and Mifflin served over 37,000 meals. Okay, updates in food service. Our updates in food service was Eastview School at the end of 2021-22 school year. We had a state health inspection, which was a very rare thing because they only pick so many schools in the state, and they chose Eastview. And they did awesome. It was really amazing and everything. I was so pleased with that. The high school kitchen received a new dishwasher at the beginning of the 21-22 school year, as well as Mifflin received a new dishwasher at the beginning of the 22-23 school year. We had no choice but to replace them because we had been fixing and they ran out of parts. So we had to replace those. All the staff last year completed the person in charge training required by the state and the local health department online, which was a really nice program that they could do. As for the free and reduced meal applications, they're available beginning on the 1st of July. We have those available online on the school website where they can go to the food service tab. They can follow the prompts to take them through the online process, just like they did last year, and it's the best option and it's faster. A lot of people, grandparents and elderly people, did not like the online process. They had a lot of difficulties. So the paper option is there if they need that. They can get a paper copy either by going to the district website on the food service tab or get a hold of any of the secretaries, and they can get a copy through that. They'll still be prompted through final forms. It'll have the food service meal tab. It'll ask them, are they going to be applying? A lot of the parents last year I heard, they said yes, they clicked yes and thought, I'm done. I don't need to do anything else. What they needed to do was still fill out an online application or a paper application. We needed something because just saying yes didn't help. So coming next year, the children that have a medical card will have a free meal status. Okay, currently, right now, any of the households that they get food stamps, they're automatically free. With the medical card, it's a pilot program that they're doing. This is the first that Ohio is eligible to do that. That will include the Medicaid card as well as the ones that have food stamps, so both of those. So it's a better opportunity, and there'll be more families that'll get a free status, which I am really happy about. USDA is proposing a gradual multi-year approach to implementing a revised nutrition standards. They expect the final rule to be in 2024, 2025, and those will start in 2025, 2026. The nutrition standards that they're covering, the areas are whole grains, sodium, flavored milk, fruits, vegetables, and sugar content. And this will hit really hard for food service. It's going to make it harder to feed the kids and make something that they want. Flavored milk, they're trying to get rid of the chocolate milk, which I'm not happy about, but they feel that there is too many kids that are eating that and drinking that, and they don't want them to have all of that. So they're wanting to implement basically to go to all white. There is programs where they're trying to question how schools feel about it, and I've put in my 2 cents, and I recommend anybody else too, or whatever, if you're ever given the opportunity, because I feel that the kids, we don't do strawberry, we don't do vanilla, but we do chocolate and white. And I feel that that's a good option for the kids, and I think that that would be something that would benefit them. One of the things that they want to cut out is sugar content. We have never tracked the sugar content in any of the schools. So what it means is everything that has any amount of sugar, they would regulate that. Right now they're regulating sodium, and starting next year, they're going to cut 10% of what the content is that we're allowed to have for sodium. So as for shortages, I don't know yet what shortages we're going to have, and I won't know until August what shortages we might face because of the changes that they're wanting to make. We'll have to find out from vendors who will be able to supply the food that we need based on the criteria that USDA is giving us. Do you have any questions?
Any questions?
Thank you. Good report.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, next up, I, approval of donations. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
Discussion.
Mr. Mosier,
4.
Mrs. Melissa Walker,
4.
Mrs. Connerman,
4.
Miss Amy Walker.
4. And then we have J Treasurer's business with the addendum 1 through 4. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Is it 1 through 8?
Second.
No.
Thank you, Mr. Mosier. All right, number 1, approval of monthly financial reports. In May, expenditures exceeded revenues, but if you look at the revenues, the local and other generated revenue tab was about $700,000, $735,000 down this May as last May, and that was almost exclusively because of the homestead and rollback. Last year, they got it in May. The state sent it to us in May. This year, they didn't send it to us in June. So that's a matter of timing, so that's what that accounts for. And then as far as expenditures, the huge variation in expenditures was the offset. Like I said earlier, we had talked about in December, those budget reductions from the state, and we put all the ESSER offsets in salaries, in retention and recruitment. We did that in May, so that's why the revenues were skewed in salaries and benefits in May. Overall, we're pretty much on track for what we said we were going to spend. We're right in line with revenues and expenditures. Nothing out of the ordinary so far for that. Moving on to the temporary appropriations, basically that's just me sending temporary budgets to the county auditor, so we have approval to do business starting July 1 before the permanent budget gets done. Super blanket purchase orders, number 3, things like electricity, utilities, fuel. We don't know how much we're going to spend, so we have to have a blanket purchase order saying, we'll spend at least somewhere in this vicinity. So necessary appropriations modifications, just so I can change the appropriations before I send it to the county auditor. And number 5 are the permanent appropriations, which basically are just the overall ending up budgets for the year. Request electricity quote number 6. Accept the electricity quotes from Meta and authorize the execution and delivery of a master electric agreement, sales agreement between the district and Meta. The reason this is on here, for the past couple of years, Madison has used the Ohio School Plan, which has a program called Power for Schools. So let me just make it clear. Meta and Ohio School Council do not Meta and Ohio School Council, they don't provide energy, they don't generate energy, they aren't brokers. All they are is the consortium. So the Ohio School Council has a program called Power for Schools, and that program just goes out and seeks, and they decided to go with NG as the supplier. I called Harbor Energy, which was the thing that all the people in the district are using, and then I also got a hold of Meta, and Meta uses it's called Direct Energy. So Meta does it a little bit different. Instead of just using one supplier, they go out and bid multiples, and Meta was able to get us not only a lower per kilowatt hour rate, the per kilowatt hour rate also didn't include about 9 cents of hidden charges that the NG quote had. So when I sent you guys that email a couple weeks ago, the savings, and that's not like a guaranteed amount because we don't know how much electricity we're going to use, but based on how much electricity we have used and based on the 2 agreements, one from Ohio School Council, one from Meta, we're going to be saving $40,000 by switching. So I recommend we just utilize a different consortium and get a little bit better rate. So that's what that is. Before I move on, did you guys have any questions on that electricity or energy? Okay. The next one, approval of an insurance quote from Reinhardt, Walters, and Danner for fleet and liability insurance and the execution of accepting coverage from Ohio School Plan for the 23-24 school year. I would like to introduce Gary Walters, if you wouldn't mind standing. He's the agent from Walters, Reinhardt, and Danner that actually was who we would purchase the Ohio School Plan through. The reason I wanted to put this on, it didn't just, roll over going with SORSA, is because this is a completely different program. As I pointed out in the email and, several emails and discussion, it's not exactly an apples to apples. For example, SORSA's liability rates that have $15 million, and Ohio School Plans is $13 million. However, before I just blanketly suggested that we reduce our liability, I went and reached out to all the local districts, and there's only one district around that had the same levels as us. That's because they had SORSA. Every other district, Ontario, Lexington, Clearport, Mansfield, they were all lower. And then in addition to that, Mr. Walters pointed out that since Ohio School Plans has been in the inception, said the most they've ever paid out in a liability claim is $3.5 million. So, you know, to go from 15 million to 13 million is a reduction, but if it's 13 million still overkill, you know, I'm not real sure it's I think it's beneficial to save the money. There's some other things, for example, flood insurance and earthquake insurances in SORSA. We really don't need flood insurance and earthquake insurance. If you'd like, if the board would like to not accept that risk and purchase that, we can at an additional rate. I personally don't think it's necessary. Mr. Walters can share some things with you on that. Ms. Walker did ask me if I did have a concern, and there was a concern I did have, but Mr. Walters has addressed that through going with a different cyber policy. Mr. McVicker will like that because we talked about cyber. The Ohio School Plans cyber policy was not as strong as SORSA's cyber policy, so I asked Mr. Walters to go out and seek additional plan coverages, different plans, and he was able to find us a cyber plan that is very comparable to the SORSA plan. And in some areas it's better, in some areas it's not quite as strong. But the nice thing about going with a separate cyber plan, if we, and when I say cyber plan, we're talking about social engineering, or somebody, you know, does malware or ransomware. If we happen to have something happen with this standalone policy, it only affects the standalone policy. It doesn't affect the rates of it. It doesn't go against our experience for everything else. So, you know, like if you had a car accident and you have a couple car accidents, your car insurance goes up. Well, this cyber is standalone, so if something happens with the cyber, it's not going to affect our fleet insurance or our liability insurance or property insurance or crime or theft or all that stuff. So it's there are some differences, but even though there are differences, my personal feeling is it's worth the savings because it's a substantial savings, almost $38,000 a year. Before I move on to number 8, which is, we've discussed that earlier also this year, do you have any questions that you would like to ask of myself or Mr. Walters about the policies? Because right now would be a perfect time to ask away anything with regards to our fleet and property insurance.
Any questions?
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that. And number 8, accept the amended school compensation agreement between Airport West LLC and the Madison Local School District. We had, Mr. Peterson and I had brought this to you, to your attention, and Mr. Bowersock had come and presented to you several months ago. It took them until May to get it back to us, late May, so that's why it's on the June board agenda, because it was after the May meeting when they finally got it back. Basically what happened is Mr. Peterson and I negotiated, and we ended up right in the middle between what the original agreement was and what they were asking. So both Mr. Peterson and I felt it's a fair agreement. Before I take roll call, I would like to entertain any questions on 1 through 8 for the treasurers. Oh, there is one more with the addendum. I need to add that in. Sorry. The addendum is to do an advance from general fund to the adult education. An advance means it will be paid back. The reason I have to do an advance is because I'm not allowed to end the fiscal year with any fund in a negative balance. And at this point in time, they do have a negative balance. So I have to advance money from general fund to the adult ed. And they then will have the entire next fiscal year to return that money. I've spoken to Sonia Pluck, and she knows she's going to get about $10,000 from the state in July and another $6,000 from a different grant in August, and then she can come up with the other 4 throughout. So she's aware that it would have to be paid back. She is also quite distraught and upset that we actually had to get to this point, because she said she's only had one other time in the history that she's been here that they've had to have an advance. So, questions on those?
Number 8, what was the agreement? What dollar amount or middle amount, percentage, whatever?
The first 3 years were still the same at $110,000 a year, and then years 4 through 15 were 60 or like 67,000. They're right in the middle. Right off the top. Well, I'll tell you what. No, I didn't put it in. I filed it away. I'm sorry. I should have kept it with me. I'll tell you what I'll do is tomorrow I will forward you that agreement. Okay? Sorry, I do not have the numbers. Any other questions? Hearing none, Mrs. Melissa Walker.
4.
Mr. Mosier.
4.
Mrs. Cotterman.
I will be voting for on all except number 7. I'm going to abstain for my employment. It's a conflict of interest. Thank you.
Okay. Miss Amy Walker.
4.
Okay.
All right, next up, K, matters related to personnel. We have items 1 through 3, and then we have number 4 on the addendum. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
And second.
I'll second.
Discussion?
Just one item to bring to your attention. If you'd look at item 3A, the administrative personnel restructuring, just want to be very clear about this and what's happening here. Ultimately, by restructuring, we will save, the district will save approximately $100,000 for next school year by eliminating 2 administrative positions, the technology coordinator position and the director of federal programs, gifted and assessment that we contract through Mid-Ohio for. We'll be eliminating those positions and creating the position of director of school improvement, assessment, and federal programs, and then hiring Mr. McVicker to fill that position, and providing an annual stipend of $7,500 to Nathan Stump to take on the duties, in addition to his principal duties, take on the duties of the district gifted coordinator, which Mrs. Gonzalez did previously in that, in her position contracted through Mid-Ohio. And then on the confidential personnel, which is on the back of your addendum, that also is part of the restructuring, and providing Luke Strom with an annual stipend of $7,500 because he will be taking on additional duties with the elimination of the tech coordinator position. So with these changes, and then in July I will be coming to you with an amendment to the administrative salary schedule, adding the director of school improvement, assessment, and federal programs to that, which will modify Mr. McVicker's salary. But again, through all of this restructuring, the district will save about $100,000.
Sounds good.
Mr. Mosier.
4.
Mrs. Melissa Walker.
4.
Mrs. Cotterman.
4.
Miss Amy Walker.
4. And we have superintendent's business, L, 1 through 13, and then 14 is on the addendum. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
And discussion?
The only real item I want to draw your attention to would be number 5, and just want to make very clear that that contract, there is no cost to the district for that contract. We have worked with Family Life Counseling and the Richland County Mental Health Board for the last 2 years, where the Mental Health and Recovery Services Board has paid a $50,000 fee to Family Life Counseling on our behalf so that we could have 20 hours worth of services of a licensed counselor in the district to help with our student mental health needs. And this contract is kind of codifying everything that goes into that. But the County Mental Health Board will continue to incur that $50,000 cost on our behalf. This just codifies how that will work and payroll and those kind of things. So it's probably more of a contract between the Mental Health Board and Family Life Counseling, but we are included in it since they are serving our district through that contract.
Okay.
Ready? Mrs. Melissa Walker.
4.
Mrs. Connerman.
4.
Mr. Mosier.
4.
Miss Amy Walker.
4. And M, visitor comments. Would anyone like to address the board? And N, president's business. We have a Board of Education work session on July 12th in the Board of Education office at 4 p.m. The next regular Board of Education meeting will be July 19th. And then we have a special meeting on July 27th at the Board of Education office at 4 p.m. And can I get a motion to adjourn?
So, second.
Mrs. Melissa Walker.
4.
Mr. Mosier.
4.
Mrs. Connerman.
4.
Miss Amy Walker.
4.
Oh, worked out good.
You see a box underneath.